Every headline this week is about the same fight. Elon Musk and Sam Altman are trading punches on X. Apple is suing OpenAI over 400 poached engineers. The whole industry is treating it like a season finale. I've watched this show before, and I can tell you the plot rarely matters. Because while everyone stares at the drama, a much quieter number just crossed a line that should genuinely worry every American AI lab. Since early February, Chinese open-weight models have accounted for more than 30% of the tokens that US companies run every single week. At the peak, it hit 46%. 1 year ago, that number was under 2%. Let me say that again, because it deserves to be said slowly. In roughly 12 months, Chinese models went from a rounding error to nearly half of American enterprise AI traffic. That is not a trend. That is a migration. And today I want to walk through exactly why it's happening. Because the reason is almost boringly rational, and that is precisely what makes it dangerous for the incumbents. Let's start with the only number that reliably moves enterprise decisions. Price. Open-weight Chinese models are consistently 60 to 90% cheaper than the flagship offerings from OpenAI and Anthropic. And I don't mean cheaper in some hand-wavy way. DeepSeek's V4 Flash runs about 14 cents per million input tokens. OpenAI's GPT 5.5 sits around $5 for the same million tokens. That is not a discount, that is a different universe. When you are a startup burning runway or a platform team with a fixed infrastructure budget, a 35 times price gap is not a line item. It is the entire strategy. Now, the usual defense from the US labs is that you get what you pay for. Cheap models are cheap because they're worse. And 18 months ago, that was true. It is not true anymore. And pretending otherwise is how you lose a market. Look at the benchmarks that actually matter for production work. Agentic tasks, tool use, long context reasoning. Jipu's GLM 5.2 now lands within about a single percentage point of Opus 4.8 on key agentic benchmarks, while costing roughly 1/5 as much. Sit with that. For a rounding error's worth of quality, you are paying 5 times the price. No serious engineering organization ignores a trade like that forever. And here's the part the hype cycle keeps missing. This is not consumers clicking a shiny app. This is infrastructure. DeepSeek alone is now routing over 5 trillion tokens a week through OpenRouter, the single largest vendor on the platform. Alibaba's Qwen is right behind it. These are not tourists kicking the tires. These are production workloads, running quietly inside American companies where nobody films a launch video about it. Lindy, an AI automation startup, publicly moved 100% of its traffic off Claude and onto DeepSeek. Airbnb, Uber, and a long list of companies that would rather not be named have quietly put Chinese open-weight models into production. The decision makers here are not pundits. They are engineers looking at a bill. So why does open weight matter so much beyond the price tag? Because open weights change the whole risk calculus. When a model is open, you can download it, run it on your own hardware, and stop sending your customers' data to a third party's API. You get to pin a version so a vendor can't silently swap the model out from under your product overnight. You can fine-tune it on your own data without asking permission. For a lot of engineering leaders, that control is worth more than the last 2 points on a leaderboard. The closed labs sell you the best model in the world, but they also sell you dependency. And dependency is exactly the thing a good architect is trained to avoid. Now let me steelman the other side, because I don't want to be the guy who mistakes a token count for the whole story. Tokens are not revenue. 46% of token volume does not mean 46% of the money, and it certainly doesn't mean 46% of the mission-critical work. When a bank needs its most sensitive reasoning done, when a hospital needs an audited, indemnified compliance system, they are still overwhelmingly reaching for the American frontier labs. The absolute cutting edge, the hardest reasoning, the newest capabilities, still comes out of OpenAI, Anthropic, and Google first. Chinese labs are, for the most part, fast, excellent followers. And there are real, legitimate questions about data governance, about what it means to build your stack on models whose training and provenance you can't fully audit, and about export controls and geopolitics that no enterprise can wave away. But here's why I don't find those objections as comforting as the incumbents seem to. Volume is not nothing. Volume is where habits form. Volume is where a generation of engineers learns which tools they reach for by default. When 40% of the tokens flowing through American software are running on Chinese weights, you are not just losing a slice of today's market. You are losing the muscle memory of the people who will architect the next decade of systems. Developers standardize on what they use every day. And right now, more and more of them are using DeepSeek and Qwen every day because the price to performance math simply refuses to lose an argument. There's a strategic irony here worth naming. The American open source retreat created this vacuum. When the leading US labs pulled back from releasing open weights and leaned into closed, premium, API-only models, they left the entire open weight tier of the market wide open. China walked straight into it, not out of some master plan necessarily, but because there was a huge unserved segment of developers who wanted good, cheap, controllable models, and somebody was going to serve them. If you abandon a category, you don't get to be surprised when a competitor owns it. So what should you actually take from all of this as someone who builds or buys AI? A few things. Stop treating Chinese model as a synonym for worse. For a large and growing class of tasks, it is now a synonym for same quality, a fraction of the cost, and you can run it yourself. Second, if you're an American lab, the moat you're defending is the frontier, and the frontier is a treadmill. You have to keep sprinting because the follower is closing the gap in months, not years, and the follower is undercutting you by 90%. And third, if you're an engineer, do the boring thing. Benchmark the options on your own workload, look at the real bill, and don't let brand loyalty or a Twitter feud make an architecture decision that should be made on a spreadsheet. Here's my verdict. The frontier still belongs to the United States. On the hardest problems, at the absolute edge, the American labs are still first, and that genuinely matters. But the frontier is not where most of the work happens. Most of the work is ordinary, high volume, cost sensitive, and increasingly it is running on Chinese open weights, because on price and control, the argument is already over. This is not a story about one country being smarter than another. It's a story about economics doing what economics always does. The incumbents didn't get out-innovated. They got out-priced in a market they chose to walk away from. And unless the US labs find a real answer at the low end, not a press release, an actual competitive open weight offering, that 30 to 46% number isn't the peak, it's the floor. Watch the token charts, not the drama. The tokens don't lie, and right now they're telling a story nobody on X wants to talk about. If this is the kind of analysis you want more of, the number behind the noise, subscribe, and I'll keep pulling these apart. I'm skeptical, so you don't have to be.